At 3:47 in the morning, a big passenger plane with 312 people on board was falling fast from the sky. Nothing could save it. The pilots had lost control. People were screaming. Then suddenly someone grabbed the controls and pulled the plane out of danger. 158 people survived. But when investigators looked into it, that person was already dead before it happened. Before you watch full story, comment below from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. It is Friday night, October 3rd, 2025. The time is 11:21 in the evening. You are standing in a queue at Gate 47, Terminal 5, London Heathrow Airport, and the gate agent has just called boarding for Transatlantic Airways Flight 811 to New York John F. Kennedy International Airport. The announcement echoes through the terminal in that flat, professional voice that airports use, calm and unhurried, as if nothing that happens here is ever truly urgent. You have done this route before. Many times. London to New York. Red-eye overnight flight. 8 hours over black water with the cabin dark and the engines humming and absolutely nothing outside the windows except the North Atlantic Ocean 38,000 feet below and the occasional distant cluster of stars if the cloud cover breaks. You know the routine perfectly by now. You find your seat. You arrange your small comforts. You put your sleep mask on and your earplugs in. You lean against the window wall and close your eyes and let the engines carry you westward through the dark while you sleep, and you wake up somewhere over New England with your neck sore and your mouth dry and 8 hours of your life quietly consumed. It is not a pleasant way to travel. It is simply the fastest way to cross an ocean. Your seat is 23A. Window seat. Left side of the aircraft, toward the rear. You always choose window seats on long flights, not because you particularly enjoy looking out at the darkness. There is nothing to see at night over the Atlantic, only the reflection of your own face staring back at you from the black glass, but because the curved wall of the fuselage gives you something solid and real to lean against while you sleep. Small things matter on overnight flights. You learn this after enough of them. Flight 811 tonight is operated on a Boeing 777. It is a wide-body aircraft, long and white and very large, and it sits on the tarmac outside the terminal windows like a patient and enormous animal simply waiting to be told it may go. 312 passengers are booked on this flight. It is completely full. Friday night transatlantic crossings are always full, business travelers returning to New York after a week of meetings in London, families coming home from half-term holidays in Europe, students and academics and people of every kind who have been away from home for too long and are ready to stop being away. The departure lounge is busy and a little noisy and smells of coffee and perfume and the particular anxious energy of people about to spend a night on an airplane. You join the boarding queue at 11:38. The jetway smells the way jetways always smell, rain outside and jet fuel and recycled air, and underneath everything a trace of the industrial carpet cleaner they use on overnight aircraft between cycles. The cabin ahead of you is already half filled with passengers settling into their seats, reaching up to open and close overhead bins, shuffling sideways past each other in the narrow aisle with the practiced and mildly resigned patience of people who have performed this particular awkward dance many times before. Flight attendants move through the aisles ahead of you with professional calm, offering blankets to passengers who want them, taking jackets and hanging them, answering questions in low considerate voices. Everything is ordinary. Everything is exactly as it always is on a Friday night departure from Heathrow, and there is no reason to feel anything other than the mild familiar tedium of boarding a long flight you have boarded many times before. You are counting row numbers as you move toward the back of the aircraft. You pass row 8, row 9, row 10. You are about to pass row 12 when you notice her. You are not sure, afterward, why she is the one who catches your eye. There is no single dramatic reason. She is not doing anything that should make her stand out in a crowded boarding aircraft. She is not arguing with anyone or blocking the aisle or making noise of any kind. She is not the kind of person who radiates distress loudly or demands attention by being difficult. She is, in fact, the precise and complete opposite of all of those things. She is still in a way that is unusual. Genuinely, profoundly still, in the way that very few people actually are in a crowded space. The kind of stillness you more often associate with someone who has been trained to be still, who has learned stillness as a discipline rather than simply falling into it by nature. She is sitting in seat 12C, which is the middle seat of a middle row, and she does not look annoyed about being in a middle seat the way the vast majority of passengers do when they discover they have been assigned the least desirable position on a long overnight flight. She does not look like anything in particular. She simply sits there occupying her space with a quiet that feels deliberate. She is mid-30s, with pale skin, not just naturally light skin, but the specific, particular pallor that comes from a prolonged period of very inadequate sleep, the kind of paleness that makes the shadows under the eyes look less like tiredness and more like bruises that have been carefully pressed into the face over many consecutive difficult nights. Dark circles. Dark hair pulled straight back without any particular effort or styling, just back and out of the way. She is wearing a charcoal gray jacket of the military style, the kind with several pockets placed across the chest and arms in the practical, deliberate pattern of field gear, designed for carrying things you need quick access to, over black clothing underneath. She has no book open. No tablet or phone in her hands. No headphones. No magazine. No blanket request from the flight attendant who is moving through the row. Nothing at all except herself, sitting in the middle seat with her hands folded in her lap and her eyes open and fixed on the seat back that is directly in front of her face. The 1,000-yard stare. You know it when you see it. That very particular quality of vacancy in a person's eyes that means they are not seeing what is in front of them at all, that their gaze has traveled somewhere else entirely, somewhere far away and inward, somewhere the aircraft cabin and the boarding noise and the Friday night crowd of passengers simply do not exist. She is somewhere else entirely, in a place that has nothing to do with seat 12C on transatlantic flight 811 at London Heathrow on a Friday night in October. You would have kept walking. The thought of her would have dissolved into the general blur of a crowded boarding process and been completely forgotten within the hour. Except for two specific things that catch your eye in the 3 or 4 seconds you spend moving past her row. The first thing is the dog tags. There is a chain around her neck, the kind of ball chain that military identification tags hang from, and for just one brief moment when she shifts her position slightly in her seat, the movement causes the chain to move and the metal tags to catch the overhead cabin lighting. You see them clearly for 1 second. 2 small rectangles of stamped metal. Military issue. Then the motion stops and they settle back against her chest and disappear inside the collar of her jacket. The second thing is her right hand. While you are still in the aisle, still moving with the line of passengers behind you pressing slowly forward, her right hand lifts off her lap and comes to rest on the armrest beside her. And then it begins to move. The movements are small. They are careful and precise. They are unmistakably deliberate rather than unconscious. It is not nervous fidgeting, not the restless tapping of someone trying to manage anxiety about flying, not the absent rhythm of someone listening to music inside their head. It is something else, something more specific and more trained than any of those things. Her fingers trace careful and precise patterns on the surface of the armrest as if they are moving across something that is not physically there, an instrument panel, a set of controls, a checklist being run from pure muscle memory. Like the hands of a very experienced pilot working through a pre-flight procedure on an aircraft that exists only in her mind. You think, ex-military. Almost certainly a pilot. Probably dealing with post-traumatic stress, or severe chronic insomnia, or most likely some difficult combination of the two. Probably just another person trying to get through a long night crossing the Atlantic Ocean the only way she currently knows how to get through it. You think, this is not your business. Leave her alone and keep walking. You find seat 23A and you settle in. You buckle your seatbelt and arrange your small things, sleep mask in your lap, earplugs in your pocket within easy reach, the pillow wedged between your back and the seat. The man in 23B nods at you briefly and you nod back, and that is the complete extent of your interaction with him for the entire flight. You lean against the window and let the familiar sounds of a finishing boarding process settle around you, the last overhead bins closing, the rustle of people arranging themselves, the murmur of the safety announcement beginning at the front of the cabin, the soft closing thump of the main cabin doors. At 11:45, the cabin lights dim to their overnight setting, a low, diffuse blue-gray that makes everything look slightly quieter and slightly more solemn. At 11:47, the Boeing 777 pushes back from gate 47 with a low mechanical groan and begins the slow taxi toward the runway. It stops twice on the taxiway as other aircraft cross ahead of it, then sits at the end of the departure runway for 4 minutes and 12 seconds while a clearance is processed and a preceding aircraft clears the area. Then the engines build from their low steady hum to a deep and sustained roar that you feel not just in your ears but in your chest and in your back through the seat and in your teeth, and the aircraft begins to accelerate down the runway, and the familiar pressure of acceleration pushes you back, and the runway lights blur past the window in a streak of white and orange, and the nose tilts up, and the wheels leave the ground, and London falls away beneath you, first the runway, then the airport perimeter, then the spread of orange and white and gold city lights going wide and bright in every direction below, and then there is cloud, and then above the cloud there is darkness, and then there is 38,000 feet of open night air between the belly of the aircraft and the surface of the North Atlantic Ocean below. You pull your sleep mask down over your eyes. You fit your earplugs in. You lean against the window wall and close your eyes. It is 11:51 in the evening on October 3, 2025. 312 people are settling into the dark quiet of a long overnight flight. The cabin is almost completely still. The engines carry everyone westward through the darkness at 560 miles per hour. You have approximately 4 hours and 2 minutes before everything changes. You will never see the woman in seat 12C again after this moment. Not alive. Not in any condition that the current laws of biology and physics as understood would recognize as being alive and present and functioning. But in 4 hours and 2 minutes, she is going to do something that should be impossible. She is going to save your life and the lives of 157 other people on this aircraft. And she is going to do it 26 seconds after she is already dead. The truth about the woman in seat 12C does not begin on the aircraft. It begins 24 hours earlier, on Thursday, October 2, 2025, in a small clean room with no windows at a facility whose precise location does not appear in any document that can be accessed without authorization at the 4-star general level or above. The room smells of filtered air and institutional carpet. It is lit by overhead fluorescent lights that produce a flat, even illumination with no shadows and no warmth. Rachel Noor has spent a great deal of time in rooms exactly like this one over the past 3 years, and she is used to it the way you get used to most things that are unpleasant but constant. You stop noticing the specific details of the unpleasantness and simply move through it as part of the landscape of your day. She has been part of Project Echo for 3 years now. She was recruited at 29, when a neuroscientist named Dr. Sarah Hollis sat across from her in a room very much like this one and told her, with careful and measured words, that her neurological profile was unlike anything the program had previously encountered, and that they would very much like to explore what she could do. Rachel had been a pilot for 7 years at that point. She had been flying experimental platforms for 2. She thought she understood what she was being recruited for. She did not. The man sitting across from her today is referred to in all program documents only as director. She does not know his actual name. She stopped trying to learn it about 18 months into the program, when it became clear to her that the distance between them was structural and intentional and would not be bridged regardless of how long she sat in rooms across from him. He has a folder on the table in front of him. He does not open it. He has already read everything inside it many times. "Your latest medical evaluation results came back yesterday," he says. His voice is careful and completely level, the voice of a man who has spent many years learning to deliver unwelcome information without triggering the kind of defensive reaction that makes difficult conversations harder. "I have already read the results," Rachel says. "Then you know that you are not currently cleared for active operational duties. Your neurological interaction indicators are elevated well above the personal baseline we established for you 18 months ago. The episodes are becoming more frequent and more." He pauses. He is choosing his word with precision. Uncontrolled. I am aware, she says. Rachel. He uses her first name. In 3 years he has not done this before. She registers the change immediately. It means the conversation she is about to have is more serious than the ones they have had before. What we are observing in you right now, the expansion of your perceptual range, the involuntary activations that are happening without your conscious initiation, the inability to fully suppress the awareness when you want to, this is not something we have encountered with any other subject in the program. Not at this level. Not with this rate of progression. We need to bring you in for extended evaluation. Not a 2-day assessment. We are talking about weeks of intensive monitoring and testing. We need to understand the full scope of what is happening before. Before what, exactly, she asks. He does not answer the question directly. Before we lose our ability to keep it within safe parameters, he says instead. She looks down at her hands resting in her lap. She can feel, through the soles of her shoes on the tiled floor of this small room, the vibration of the building's climate control system running in the mechanical spaces 3 floors below them. She can feel, at the very edge of her awareness, faint, like a sound heard through several walls, the 2 government vehicles sitting in the underground parking structure beneath the building. Their engines are off but still warm from recent use, and she can feel the metal of them contracting in tiny increments as it cools, each microscopic tick registering in her awareness with a clarity that should not be possible given that she is 3 floors above them and has no line of sight to them and has never been told they are there. She turns the perception down deliberately, the way you turn a radio dial. The perception does not turn off. It has not reached 0 in 3 weeks. The dial no longer seems to have a 0 position. I need to get to New York before I come in, she says. My mother's birthday is Saturday. I have told her I would be there. I have missed the last 2 years in a row because of program commitments and I am not going to miss a third. Major Noor. I will come in directly after I land. I will walk through arrivals at JFK and get straight into whatever car you send for me and I will be at the facility before noon on Saturday. You have my complete word on that. I will be on flight 811 out of Heathrow Friday night. It lands Saturday morning. He studies her face for a long time without speaking. He is very good at reading people. It is one of his core professional skills. He is looking for the thing she is not saying out loud. You are not to interact with any aircraft systems during the flight, he says at last. No engagement with mechanical systems of any kind. No active use of the awareness. You are a passenger on a commercial flight. That is the totality of what you are on that aircraft. You sit in your seat, you do nothing, and you land in New York. I know the protocols. The protocols, he says, with careful emphasis, were written to manage abilities at a significantly lower magnitude than what you are currently exhibiting. I want to be very direct with you about that. She stands up. She straightens her jacket. I will sit in my seat for 8 hours and I will sleep and I will be the most completely ordinary and uninteresting passenger on the entire aircraft. You have nothing to worry about. He does not look as though he has nothing to worry about. But he lets her leave. She does not tell him about the headaches. The specific, building pressure that develops behind her eyes whenever she is in close proximity to large aircraft with their engines running and their systems under full operational load, a pressure that has been intensifying steadily over the past 6 weeks and now begins the moment she steps into any airport. She does not tell him that she can feel, through the floor of whatever room she is standing in, the operational signatures of heavy machinery in the surrounding environment in a way that has become as constant and automatic as breathing. She does not tell him that 3 nights ago she woke at 3 in the morning in her room near the facility and lay in the complete darkness of her bed and felt, through the mattress beneath her and the floor beneath the mattress and the building's concrete foundation beneath the floor, the distant vibration of a commercial aircraft passing at altitude miles overhead, and knew, without instruments, without calculation, purely by the feel of it, the aircraft's approximate type and altitude and which side of its engine configuration was running slightly off its optimal operating parameters. She tells him none of this. She picks up her bag and she leaves the facility and she goes to the airport and she gets on flight 811 at London Heathrow with her charcoal grey jacket and her military dog tags and her hands that know in their deepest muscle memory the feel of every aircraft she has ever flown. She is going to sit in her seat. She is going to do nothing. She is going to go home. It is the very early hours of Saturday morning, October 4th, 2025. The time is 3:46 and 58 seconds in the morning. The aircraft is at 38,000 feet. It is 287 miles west of the coast of Ireland, in the darkest and most remote section of the North Atlantic crossing. There is nothing below the aircraft for hundreds of miles in any direction except the black surface of the ocean. The nearest land of any significance is the coast of Ireland to the east. The nearest land in the direction of travel is the coast of Newfoundland, still hours ahead. The aircraft is alone in a vast and dark and empty sky, and everything aboard it is quiet. Most of the 312 passengers are asleep or in the shallow drifting half-sleep of overnight travel. The cabin lights have been at their lowest setting for hours. The window shades are all pulled closed. In the blue-dark quiet of the aircraft, people breathe slowly and shift occasionally in their seats and exist in that particular suspended state that long overnight flights produce, not quite asleep, not quite awake, somewhere between the two in a way that feels like traveling through time as much as through space. A baby in the back rows of the aircraft wakes briefly and makes a sound and is soothed back to quiet within 30 seconds. A flight attendant moves through the darkened aisle with a small penlight, checking on passengers, moving with the practiced quiet of someone who does not want to disturb anything. Rachel Knorr is not asleep. She has not slept in 32 consecutive hours. She is sitting in seat 12C with her hands folded in her lap and her eyes open in the dark, and she is doing, as she has been doing since the aircraft leveled off at cruise altitude 5 hours ago, the one thing she can do, which is try. She is trying to be quiet. Trying to close the door. Trying to pull the awareness back from the aircraft around her and hold it still inside herself and simply be, for 8 hours, nobody. Just a passenger. Just a tired woman in a middle seat going home to see her mother. She is not fully succeeding. The two starboard engines feel slightly different from the two port engines. Not wrong. Not a developing fault. Just a slight operational asymmetry, a degree of difference in the thermal signature, the way she feels it, something the instruments are not reporting and the crew is not aware of, and that in all probability means nothing at all. It keeps presenting itself at the edge of her attention anyway, again and again, the way a small sound in a quiet house keeps pulling your focus back to it no matter how many times you decide to ignore it. She pushes it down again. She is nobody. She is nothing. She is just going home. At 3:46 and 58 seconds in the morning, the RQ-4 Global Hawk surveillance drone with military designation Shadow Ridge 7, operating at an altitude of 38,500 feet on a classified reconnaissance mission, experiences a sudden and total failure of its onboard navigation computer. The programming that keeps the drone on its designated flight path disappears from its systems completely. In the absence of navigational guidance, with no corrective input available, the drone begins an uncommanded descent. It drops 500 feet in 62 seconds, falling directly and precisely into the flight corridor that Transatlantic Flight 811 is occupying. The air traffic controllers at Shanwick Oceanic Control Center will spend many months in the investigation that follows trying to identify the exact sequence of decisions and failures that resulted in a classified military drone operating at 38,500 feet in active commercial airspace with no coordination and no collision avoidance capability active. They will identify 22 seconds during which the collision could have been prevented. They will find those 22 seconds very difficult to think about for a long time afterward. At 3:47 and 23 seconds in the morning of October 4, 2025, the RQ-4 Global Hawk strikes Transatlantic Airways Flight 811 at the junction of the right wing and the fuselage, the wing root, the most structurally critical point of connection between the wing and the aircraft body, at a closing speed of approximately 280 miles per hour. The drone's remaining fuel load detonates on impact. The explosion that follows is enormous and immediate. The right engine, all 12 tons of it, is torn completely free of its mounting and disappears into the darkness below. 22 feet of the right wing's trailing edge is destroyed. The structural members that connect the right wing to the aircraft body are compromised in multiple locations simultaneously. The pressure hull of the fuselage is breached in a linear pattern consistent with high-velocity fragmentation impact. In the passenger cabin, the effect of all of this engineering catastrophe arrives as pure sensory shock. There is a sound that is beyond the ordinary meaning of the word explosion, a sound like the air itself cracking apart, like a crack in the fabric of the physical world, felt in the chest and the stomach and the bones before it is heard with the ears. And then, immediately, and without any interval, the aircraft rolls. It rolls to the right. Hard. Violently. With a speed that has nothing to do with the controlled banking of normal flight and everything to do with the sudden, massive, catastrophic asymmetry of an aircraft that has just lost an engine and a significant portion of its right wing in the same instant. The overhead bins fail. Luggage erupts downward and sideways. Carry-on bags and laptops and duty-free purchases and all the accumulated small cargo of 312 people in transit become projectiles. Passengers are thrown violently against their seatbelts with forces that are already breaking things inside the ones who are belted in. Those who are not fully secured are thrown against whatever surface the roll makes suddenly downward. The aircraft fills with the sound of 300 people screaming, and it is not the frightened yelping of unexpected bad turbulence. It is the sound of people who understand in their blood and their bones and the deepest animal part of their brain that they are dying right now, tonight, in the darkness over the Atlantic, and there is nothing they can do about it. The aircraft rolls past 90 degrees. The horizon is gone from every window. Past 120 degrees, it is approaching inverted. Past 140 degrees. Past 150 degrees. Boeing's most senior flight test engineers will sit with the flight data recorder output weeks later and calculate, with the cold precision of people who work in numbers and physics rather than in hope, that at 140 degrees of uncontrolled roll at that airspeed and altitude with that level of structural damage to the lifting surfaces, the probability of recovery is zero. Not near zero. Not very low. Zero. The aerodynamics and the physics and the mathematics of the situation are unambiguous on this point. In row 12, the shrapnel from the right engine's detonation has traveled through the fuselage wall on a trajectory that the structural analysis team will document with great precision in the months after the crash. Seat 12C is directly in the path of that trajectory. The penetration is high velocity and immediate. Rachel Knorr is killed at 3:47 and 25 seconds in the morning. 2 seconds after the initial impact. The death is instantaneous. One moment she exists and in the next moment she does not, and between those two moments there is no interval long enough for any experience of what is happening. She is gone. The aircraft does not stop rolling. In the cockpit, Captain James Wright has both hands on the control yoke and both feet on the rudder pedals and he is fighting. He is 31 years into his career. He is one of the most experienced pilots in commercial aviation. He has trained for emergency scenarios of many kinds over those 31 years, engine failures, hydraulic failures, structural events, extreme weather. He has trained well and he remembers his training and he is applying everything he knows right now with complete focus and complete commitment. It is not enough. He knows it is not enough. He has known since 100 degrees of roll that this aircraft has passed the point where his skill or anyone else's skill can make a difference. He knows the mathematics of his situation as well as the Boeing engineers do. He knows that the aircraft died 30 seconds ago and that what remains is the time required to fall from 38,000 feet to the surface of the ocean, which is approximately 4 minutes, and that those 4 minutes are a formality that physics is simply working through. He keeps fighting anyway. Because fighting is the only thing left to do, and James Wright is not a man who stops doing the only thing left to do. He is still fighting at 3:47 and 51 seconds in the morning. When something changes. The change is instantaneous. The roll stops. Not gradually, not in the slow curve of an aircraft responding over time to control inputs being applied, but immediately, as if an external force of sufficient magnitude has simply reached out and arrested the motion. The wings begin to level. The nose begins to rise. The aircraft, against every calculation that has been made and every law of physics that applies to this specific situation, begins to recover. Captain Wright feels it through his hands on the controls. He feels coordinated inputs being made across the control surfaces, aileron, elevator, rudder, inputs that he is not making and that David Chen is not making and that the autopilot, which disengaged at the moment of impact, is not making. He feels the aircraft responding to something that he has no name for, that his 31 years of training and experience has no category for. He turns in his seat to look behind him. He sees a woman standing directly behind his seat. She is completely still. The aircraft is in a recovery maneuver that is subjecting everything aboard to significant G-forces, and she is standing as if none of those forces apply to her. She has dark hair and a charcoal gray jacket with many pockets. He recognizes her. He saw her when he walked through the cabin before pushback, pale, exhausted, a woman who looked like she had not slept in a long time, sitting in her middle seat with that particular quality of absolute stillness. Her hands are extended forward, not physically touching the controls, but positioned as if she is working something that only she can feel. Her eyes are on the instrument panel. Her expression is one of absolute, total concentration, the expression of someone doing precisely what they were trained to do in precisely the situation they were trained to do it in. For 1.3 seconds, this duration is documented exactly in the cockpit voice recorder. Captain Wright looks at her. And then she is not there. And the controls are responding. And he hears himself say, out loud, to the empty space behind his seat, "What the, who are you?" And then he starts the recovery procedure. Professional. Correct. Everything in the right order, the way it was trained. Because the aircraft is responding now, the controls are alive, and James Wright does not waste a second that an aircraft is giving him. 2 passengers see it happen from the cabin. Margaret Collins is in seat 10B. She is 52 years old and she taught science and mathematics to children for 30 years and she does not believe in things she has no evidence for. She is conscious during the roll, pinned against her seatbelt, experiencing forces that she will discover later have broken 2 of her ribs. Through the cockpit door, which has swung open in the violence of the event, she has a direct line of sight into the front of the aircraft. And she sees, standing behind the 2 pilots, a woman in a gray jacket who is standing perfectly still in an aircraft that is well past the angle where standing should be physically possible. She sees the hands extended forward. She sees the focused, calm expression. She sees the dark hair. She watches for what feels like a long time and is probably 3 seconds. And then the woman is not there. And the aircraft starts to level. Margaret Collins makes a promise to herself in that exact moment that she is going to tell this story to every person in every official body that will give her the time to tell it, for as long as she lives, because it is the truth and the truth is worth saying regardless of whether anyone wants to hear it. Thomas Okonkwo is in seat 11A. He is 29 years old and he writes code for a living and he thinks in systems and logic and documented cause and effect relationships. He also sees her. He recognizes her from boarding, the woman from row 12, the pale one, the one who looked like she had not slept in weeks. He watches her walk past him through a cabin that is well past 90 degrees of roll, moving toward the front of the aircraft with a steadiness that has no physical explanation. She goes through the cockpit door. The aircraft stops rolling. Thomas Okonkwo understands with complete clarity what he has just seen and understands with equal clarity that most people are not going to want to believe him. He decides in that same moment that he will tell the truth anyway, as many times as it takes, to whoever will listen. At 4:29 in the morning of October 4, 2025, Transatlantic Airways Flight 811 makes an emergency landing at Shannon Airport on the west coast of Ireland. The aircraft is damaged beyond economic repair. Captain Wright, who has flown the final 42 minutes of the approach and landing with 2 broken arms, is removed from the aircraft on a stretcher the moment the cabin doors open. Emergency services, fire, medical, police, and 3 categories of government personnel who received calls 20 minutes before landing and came at speed through the dark Irish countryside, are waiting on the tarmac. 158 passengers survive. 154 do not. The aircraft is on the ground. 300 meters of Irish tarmac are between it and the sky it fell through. And the most consequential unanswered question of the year is hanging in the cold October air above it. It is Monday morning, October 6, 2025. The time is 6:15 in the morning. James Park is sitting alone at the long table in the NTSB field office in Shannon, Ireland, with a plastic cup of terrible coffee going cold at his elbow and every piece of evidence from Flight 811 spread across the table in front of him. The overhead fluorescent lights hum steadily. Outside the windows the Irish countryside is grey and wet with early morning rain. James has been here since 5:45. He is working against a deadline he can see very clearly even though no one has stated it explicitly. James should not be running this investigation and he knows it better than anyone in the building. The NTSB has protocols that are clear and sensible. Investigators who are also survivors and eyewitnesses of an incident are not permitted to lead the investigation of that incident. The reasons for this rule are obvious. James was in seat 14A on Flight 811. He survived with 2 broken ribs and a concussion. He is not a neutral party. He is the opposite of a neutral party. But his direct supervisor died in the crash. 3 of the 5 investigators who had been positioned to respond to a potential Atlantic incident are dead. The 4th is in a hospital in Shannon with a spinal injury that is going to keep her there for months. James Park is the sum total of what this investigation has available. He has been officially given 72 hours to compile preliminary findings before what a communication from General Marcus Webb's office has carefully described as a senior interagency oversight team arrives to take over. James has been working aviation accident investigations for 9 years. He knows exactly what senior interagency oversight team means in this context. It means the investigation is about to be taken out of his hands and reshaped into something that will not say anything anyone does not want said. He has 72 hours. He starts. The passenger manifest. 312 names. He goes through it systematically. Seat 12C, Nor, Rachel A., American national. Date of birth March 14, 1988. Occupation stated as government consultant. He runs the name through every database with his standard investigator access. What comes back is a profile that is clean in a very specific and telling way, not simply the profile of a private person with no public record, but the kind of deliberate, constructed cleanness that requires active and ongoing effort to maintain. The kind of profile that intelligence personnel call a legend. He escalates the search to military personnel records. Access denied. He calls the United States Air Force Personnel Office, provides his NTSB credentials, explains that he is conducting an active fatal aviation incident investigation, and asks for service records for the name and date of birth he provides. That name and associated service number are classified at a level above your current clearance, the voice on the other end tells him. I am unable to confirm or deny the existence of any service record for the individual you have described. He hangs up the phone. Sits for a moment. Classified. Not simply outside the military database. Not unavailable due to administrative reasons. Classified. There is a meaningful difference between those things and he recognizes it. He picks up the autopsy report for seat 12C and reads it for the 3rd time. Female, mid-30s. Cause of death, multiple high-velocity penetrating shrapnel injuries consistent with explosive decompression event. Immediately and completely fatal. Estimated time of death, 3:47 and 25 seconds in the morning. He puts the autopsy report down. He picks up the flight data recorder analysis report and opens it to the page he has already read 6 times. At 3:47 and 51 seconds, the flight data recorder registers simultaneous control surface inputs across aileron, elevator, and rudder. The inputs are coordinated with precision. They are the inputs of a recovery maneuver, correctly calculated for the aircraft's speed and attitude and structural state at that moment. The FDR diagnostic system cannot identify the source of the inputs. It cannot attribute them to the captain's controls, the first officer's controls, or the autopilot system, all of which it monitors independently and continuously. The source field in the data record reads, unknown. He looks at the two documents side by side for a long time. Rachel Knorr, time of death 3:47:25. Unknown control input initiating the recovery, 3:47:51. 26 seconds. For 26 seconds, Rachel Knorr was clinically and completely dead before the control inputs that saved the aircraft were made from an unknown source. He picks up the cockpit voice recorder transcript. He has read it 9 times. He reads it a 10th. At 3:47 and 51 seconds, Captain James Wright says, "What the, who are you?" James circles the words with a pen for the 10th time. He has not found a way to make those 3 words fit within the normal boundaries of what an aviation accident investigation is designed to understand and report. He does not think those normal boundaries are going to be adequate for this case. He calls the hospital and arranges an interview with Captain Wright for the following morning. Captain Wright is in his hospital bed with both arms in casts, clear-eyed despite the painkillers, and clearly a man who has been thinking about one specific subject for 72 hours without stopping. He listens to James's question about the cockpit voice recorder and who he was speaking to at 3:47:51, and he is quiet for a long moment before he answers. "There was someone in the cockpit with us," he says. "Standing directly behind my seat. I will be precise about what I mean, I did not feel a physical hand touch the control yoke. I am not making that claim. What I felt was a presence acting on the controls. Something was operating the control surfaces that was not me and was not David and was not the autopilot. And when I turned to look, I saw a woman. For about 1 or 2 seconds. Dark hair. A gray jacket, charcoal color, the kind with a lot of pockets. I recognized her. She was the woman from row 12, the one I had noticed when I walked through the cabin before pushback, pale, exhausted, absolutely still in her seat, the one who looked like she had not slept in a long time. That is who I saw. Behind my seat. And then she was not there. And the aircraft was responding to the controls. And I started the recovery. Her autopsy places her time of death at 2 seconds after the initial impact, James says. That is 26 seconds before the role reversal that you initiated. Wright nods. He does not look surprised. He has clearly already known this, or worked it out himself. Yes, he says. I have been told that. And yet I saw what I saw, Wright says. He looks at James steadily. I am not going to put any of this in an official statement because I am a rational person who would like to keep flying airplanes and maintain some basic level of professional credibility. But you asked me directly what I saw and what happened, and I am telling you directly, she was there. She saved my aircraft. She saved 158 people. And she was already dead when she did it. I do not know what to do with that. I expect I will spend a considerable portion of the rest of my life trying to figure out what to do with it. The senior interagency team arrives on the afternoon of the second day. 3 black SUVs pulling up to the field office. 6 federal agents in dark suits who move with the efficient authority of people accustomed to arriving places and changing the nature of those places. And 1 uniformed officer, Brigadier General Marcus Webb, United States Air Force, 2 stars, who walks through the field office door and tells James Park with complete and quiet certainty that he is assuming direction of the investigation. James does not stand up. He says NTSB has statutory jurisdiction over civilian aviation incidents. Webb says jurisdiction is appropriately shared when a classified military asset is centrally involved in the incident. James says 154 people died because of that classified military asset and their families deserve a full and honest accounting. Webb says those families will receive a thorough and accurate report about the drone navigation failure and its tragic consequences. James says, very quietly, the two words that changed the temperature of the room, Rachel Knorr. General Webb goes completely still. It is a very specific kind of stillness, not the stillness of a man encountering an unfamiliar name, but the stillness of a man who has been waiting with some dread for exactly those two words to be said by exactly this kind of person in exactly this kind of setting. Webb pulls out a chair and sits down across the table from James. They look at each other for a moment. Give me 48 hours, Webb says. 24, James says. It is Tuesday, October 24th, 2025. 3 weeks and 3 days after the crash. James Park is in a room inside the Pentagon that has no identifying number on its door and no windows in any of its four walls and no recording equipment that its occupants know about. The room is small and clean and has that specific smell of filtered air and government carpet that James has come to associate with rooms where things that will not appear in any public record are discussed. He is here because of a specific and carefully composed threat he delivered in writing, through his attorney, to 5 separate government offices on the same morning 2 weeks ago, produce Rachel Knorr's complete service record and cooperate with a full classified briefing on her capabilities and program affiliation, or receive, simultaneously and at the same moment, the cockpit voice recorder transcript, the flight data recorder anomaly report, and the signed and sworn written statements of Margaret Collins and Thomas Okonkwo, delivered to 4 international news organizations with a covering letter explaining what those documents mean and asking the one question that 3 separate investigation teams have independently documented and independently declined to include in their official reports. He is here as a result of that threat. Not as a welcome participant. Webb told him this directly and James told Webb the distinction did not matter to him. Dr. Sarah Hollis is 58 years old and she is one of the most accomplished research neuroscientists in the United States government, though her most important work over the past decade appears nowhere in any publication that any member of the public can read. She looks like someone who has not slept adequately in 3 weeks. She has not. She begins without any formality. Project Echo was initiated in 2015, she says. The foundational hypothesis was specific, that certain human beings, with particular neurological configurations not widely distributed in the general population, could be trained through a combination of intensive neurofeedback protocols, sensory isolation techniques, and specific pharmaceutical support to extend their perceptual and interactive awareness beyond the boundaries of their own bodies to directly encompass the mechanical systems of aircraft in which they were operating. In plain English, James says. She looks at him steadily. In plain English, we believe that certain people could be trained to feel aircraft. Not as a metaphor. Not as an enhanced version of ordinary pilot intuition. Literally feel them, the way you feel your own heartbeat, directly, involuntarily, as raw and immediate sensory data. The hydraulic pressure in the flight control lines. The distribution of electrical load across individual avionics systems. The mechanical stress accumulating in a structural member before any instrument has registered a change. The developing inefficiency in an engine combustion cycle that has not yet produced a measurable change in any parameter being monitored. We believed this was possible. And then we found the people who could already do rudimentary versions of it, and we built the training program, and we ran 10 years of controlled studies, and the data was not possible to dismiss or explain as coincidence or artifact. And Rachel Knorr. Dr. Hollis is quiet for a moment that is longer than the others. Rachel was in a category by herself, she says finally. Not incrementally beyond the other subjects. Exponentially beyond them. Where the most capable of our other subjects could detect developing system anomalies in aircraft they were actively piloting, Rachel could detect them in aircraft she was a passenger on, sitting in the cabin, with no instrument access, no physical contact with any control surface. Where the other subjects required significant conscious effort and specific training protocols to activate their awareness, Rachel's had begun expanding involuntarily, without her consent or initiation. In the 6 months before October 3, her perceptual range had grown substantially without any deliberate action on her part. She could feel aircraft systems from the passenger seat. She told me, in our last session 3 weeks before the crash, that she could no longer be near a large aircraft with its engines running without feeling it the way most people feel sunlight, immediately, completely, with no ability to choose not to feel it. You said her abilities were interactive, James says. Not just perceptual. She could affect systems, not just sense them. In controlled flight test conditions, with instrumented real aircraft, Rachel demonstrated the ability to produce control surface responses without any physical contact with the control inputs. Aileron deflections. Elevator adjustments. Rudder inputs. The responses were precise and appropriate for the aircraft's state at the moment of input. They were not random or approximate. They were the inputs of someone who understood the aircraft exactly and knew what it needed and could provide it. She pauses. The ability activated most reliably and most powerfully under specific conditions. What conditions? Imminent loss of life. When someone was about to die and there was a mechanical action that could prevent it. The ability became fastest, most precise, and most reliable exactly when the stakes were highest. We came to believe, and this is a theoretical framework, not a confirmed mechanism, that what we were training in Rachel was not simply an extension of conscious perception and volition. We were training something deeper. Something connected to survival at a level below conscious decision-making. Something that under sufficient pressure operates faster and more effectively than conscious thought can. James is quiet for a moment. She was dead for 26 seconds before the recovery, he says. She died at 3:47:25. The unknown control input that stopped the roll happened at 3:47:51. How do you explain that? Dr. Hollis puts her folder down on the table. She meets his eyes. What he sees in her face is not evasion, not careful management of information, not the look of someone choosing what to admit and what to withhold. It is the genuine, unsettled expression of a scientist standing at the exact edge of what her discipline can currently explain, looking over the edge, and being honest about what she sees there. I cannot explain it, she says. Not within the framework of any neuroscience that currently exists. We have a hypothesis, that whatever neurological mechanism underlies Rachel's abilities operates at a level deep enough that it can, under extreme external pressure, persist for some interval past clinical death. That the survival drive she was trained to access is so fundamental, so deeply embedded, that it continues past the point where consciousness itself has ended, for as long as the external threat remains and there is a mechanical action that can address it. But that is a hypothesis. It is not a confirmed mechanism. The science to confirm it does not yet exist. We created her capabilities. We used them. We documented them. We do not fully understand what they are or what the ultimate limits of them are. That is the truth. James nods slowly. He thinks about Rachel on that aircraft. Trying to be quiet. Trying to just go home. Unable to turn off the awareness. Feeling the aircraft around her in the dark cabin. Feeling the drone before it hit. And then not stopping, even after, even past the point where stopping should have been the only possible outcome. Here is what happens now, he says. He states his three conditions clearly. Rachel's name and rank acknowledged publicly, the Air Force Cross awarded posthumously, the public acknowledgement that she saved the aircraft and the people on it. Full public Air Force acceptance of responsibility for the drone, with full unrestricted compensation for all 154 families. And an investigation report that describes the recovery as cause undetermined, not pilot skill, because Captain Wright has 2 healed arms and a lifetime ahead of him and James will not watch him carry credit for something that was not his doing. General Webb says, and if we refuse these terms? James names the 7 addresses the complete documented file goes to simultaneously if they refuse. Then he waits. Webb calls back at 2:17 the following morning. His voice is quieter than it has been in any of their previous conversations. Something in it has shifted. The Air Force will accept public responsibility for the drone. Full compensation with no conditions attached to it. Rachel's name, her rank, the Air Force Cross, public acknowledgement of her role in the survival of the passengers of Flight 811. The program details remain classified. The investigation report will describe the recovery in the language James specified. That is more than we wanted to give, Webb says. It is less than she deserves, James says. Can you live with it? Yes, Webb says. We can. It is April 2026, a cold gray morning in Battery Park, New York City, with the wind coming off the harbor carrying the smell of salt water and the sky the color of old concrete. The memorial for the passengers of Flight 811 has been completed. It is simple granite, low and curved, with 154 names cut into it in deep clean letters. The names are in alphabetical order because the families asked for it that way. They wanted their people treated as individuals and not as a seating arrangement. Below the 154 names, after a deliberate empty space that makes the separation clear, 4 lines read. Major Rachel Knorr, United States Air Force, 1988 to 2025, she stayed until everyone else was safe. James stands in front of the granite for a long time in the cold April morning. General Webb stands a few feet behind him, hands in the pockets of his overcoat, watching the ceremony gathering behind them. You wrote that inscription, Webb says. Yes. It is not technically precise. She was dead before the recovery. She did not stay in any physical sense. It is the most accurate thing on this wall, James says. Captain James Wright finds James before the ceremony begins. His arms are healed. He is in uniform. He looks like a man who has accepted a weight and decided to carry it correctly. He stands in front of Rachel's inscription and reads the 4 lines twice. She saved us, he says quietly. Yes. And those words will never appear in any official record. No, James says. They will not. Is that enough? James looks at her name. He thinks about Robert Walsh calling him 2 months after the crash to say that he does not know what to do with owing his life to someone he never met and will never be able to thank, and has decided that the only honest answer is to live carefully and gratefully and let it cost him something every day. He thinks about Margaret Collins, who has submitted her eyewitness statement to official bodies 5 times now and had it classified 5 times and has announced her intention to keep submitting it until someone accepts it into the public record, because she is 52 years old and she believes the truth matters and she is not going to stop saying it. Ask the 158, James says. 3 months after the memorial, Dr. Sarah Hollis resigns from Project Echo on a Tuesday and sends a letter, 5 pages, technically precise, meticulously documented, to 3 major newspapers, 3 research universities, and the NTSB. It describes, without naming the program or the subject, 8 years of controlled observations of human neurological interaction with mechanical systems that exceed every existing model of what human consciousness can do. The final paragraph asks a question rather than stating a conclusion: if this evidence exists, if these abilities are real and documented, is our obligation to suppress them in the service of programs we cannot publicly name? Or is our obligation to the individuals whose extraordinary capacities we have used and hidden, and to the truth of what they did and what it cost them? She chooses to ask the question rather than answer it. She sends it to 7 places at once. 3 days of significant public attention follow. Then it goes quiet. These things always go quiet eventually. But the question is out there now, in 7 places, waiting. James sits in his apartment late one night in the weeks that follow and looks at the passenger manifest on his laptop. 312 names. He finds seat 12C. Nor, Rachel at middle seat. He thinks about her at the gate at Heathrow with her gray jacket and her dog tags and her hands moving on the armrest in the dark cabin, running through procedures that existed only in the deep memory of someone who has spent years learning to feel aircraft with the whole of herself. Trying to be nobody. Unable to stop being what she was. He opens a new document. He titles it Flight 811, a complete account. He writes for 3 hours. Everything. The CVR transcript word for word. The FDR anomaly data in full. Both eyewitness statements. Captain Wright's testimony. The classified debrief. General Webb. Dr. Hollis. Project Echo. The 26 seconds. The 3 words. All of it, complete and documented and true. He encrypts the file and sends it to 7 addresses, his lawyer, a trusted journalist, 3 international archives, a university library, and a sealed envelope marked to be opened only after his death. Not for now. For when the world is ready to hold it. 5 years from now, or 20 or 50, when the science has caught up and the fear has changed its shape and the people who need protecting no longer need protecting in the same way. He closes the laptop. He turns off the light. Outside, over the dark Atlantic, the aircraft are flying. Carrying passengers through the night at 38,000 feet above black water. Carrying people who will sleep the crossing and wake up in new cities and go home and never know what it means to fall from that height with the wings level and the engines gone and the mathematics of the situation unambiguous and final. And to be caught anyway. By someone who could not turn off what she was. Not even then. Not even after. She stayed until everyone else was safe. Flight 811, an original aviation mystery thriller. 3 timelines. 1 truth. 1 question that cannot stay classified forever. If Major Noor was dead before the aircraft recovered, then who caught us?